Welcome to Rose Pruning 101. I know some folks get very nervous at the thought of pruning roses, but really there's not a whole lot that can go wrong. Roses are very forgiving. So there are some basic ideas when it comes to pruning roses. This is a rose called sentimental. It's a floribunda, which means that it's very similar to your normal hybrid tea, but instead of one flower, you're going to get what's called a truss. Normally 3 flowers at the top, but nevertheless you'll prune it in the same way as a floribunda, maybe a little less harshly. That would be the difference. What you're looking for always, whether you're pruning a hybrid tea or you're pruning a floribunda like this rose, you always want to have what's called a basket, or a wine goblet. So it's shaped like that. You want to have air circulating in the middle. That way you're less likely to get diseases like powdery mildew and those sort of fungal problems. So always look to take out any stems which are going towards the middle. Now here's a case in point. Come closer. This one over here is growing into your goblet or basket. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to take out that one right at where the stem comes off the main stem. There we are. Nice clean cut. You want good secateurs that are sharp. You don't want to be sawing at the rose. Now here's something else you're always looking for is anything that's dead, because it's never ever going to come back. How do you know it's dead? Well, it gets this very brownish look, and there's a stem down here which is an old stem, and that has completely died down. So later on I'll go in and I'll take out this stem over here with loppers, because it's probably going to be pretty hard. Anything else? All right, let's look over here. We don't want anything that's diseased, anything that's damaged, and the plant does, it has problems. So if you look at these two, here you have ones which potentially are going to cross like that, and that's what you want to avoid as well. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to take out that one there, which would otherwise be growing inwards, because again you're not getting your basket shape. I'm going to pop that there. This too is somewhat growing inwards. Let's take that out. And if you are a little anxious about doing this, then don't go too harshly at the beginning. This is a very strange shaped stem, so you can make it look a lot better, somewhat artificially. I'm going to cut that one off over here, and now I have a much better shape like that. When you come to cutting to a bud, you'll see that sometimes people just take, it looks as if they've taken a pair of electric hedge trimmers and they cut it right across like that. That really isn't rose pruning. What you want to do when you're pruning is prune to what's called a bud. So here is a bud over here. I don't know if you can see that. Here's a little pink bud, and if it's later in the season, it tends to be easier to see. Otherwise it can be really hard. I would literally need my glasses to see. And you want to prune to an outward facing bud. So that bud is going to grow in this direction. If you prune to that one, you're pruning to one which is going to grow inwards into your basket. So this is a stem which originally was cut a whole truss, so it's not going to be very, I'm just cutting off a tiny piece, and I think I'm going to cut that off over there because it's growing into the basket. And again I have a stem that's coming out. Now there's some rather unexciting ones coming off, so I'm going to clean it up, take it off. I'm going to take off that funny little one over here, which is not doing, actually I think it's dead, just about dead. These little ones, you'll see they are not even the thickness of a pencil. So generally the rule of thumb is in rose pruning, anything thinner than a pencil you would cut off. I'm going to cut that off over there, and you'll see that whole stem now looks a lot better. This one, I have an outward facing bud over here, so I'm just going to hold the stem, and I'm cutting about an 1/8 of an inch above the bud. Now something I want you to notice is that I've cut at a very slight angle. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm guessing about 40 degrees, an angle roughly about so. The idea is as rain comes, it will run off. You don't want the rain sitting on the cut stem. Now this is, here I'm going to take off an inward facing one again. And by the way, if you have dogs, which I do, you want to pick up those bits and pieces, because if the dogs stand in it, it's really hard on their paws. Looking for an outward facing stem, an outward facing bud to prune to. Sometimes it's hard, but there's one over here. So I'm going to hold this so I don't saw it, and cutting very gently. There it is. And you'll see it starts to look a lot better. This one, and tell you what, I'm going to cut that off there just so one can see what we're doing. This one, again, looking for an outward facing bud. Yeah, and sometimes it's just not going to be terribly accommodating, and you may have to cut to an inward facing bud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut there. If an outward facing bud comes up a little bit later in the season, I will cut back to that outward facing bud, taking off that spindly one. Don't be, you can always come back and do it a bit more. Now this, I'm going to try and get in here if I can, and just cut that off, holding it so that it doesn't tear, and it's got a nice clean cut over there, and you'll see that whole stem is a lot better. This is not a terribly exciting stem, so I'm going to take it off completely at the base. You're looking for about 3 to 4 good stems. Now, this one growing into your basket, so I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to do it over there, because I am in control of the shape of the rose. And there we go. And you can see where we're going with outward facing buds, outward facing stems, pruning it to an outward facing bud. This one is a little difficult. So you could ask, what will happen if you, I'm going to go there in the meantime. What happens if you don't prune to a bud? Well, very often you can have dieback. So for example, if you, there's the bud, and if you cut about there, it's potentially a problem, because you may get dieback from there going down to the bud. So you always cut just above the bud, not enough to go into the bud, but at about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in between that, away from the bud. I'm going to get rid of that because it's growing inwards, and you'll see that the basket shape is coming nicely. Here's a nice outward facing one. I would have liked one a little lower down. I'm going to cut that spindly one off. As my granny would say, not much good to man or beast. And there's a little nub over here I'm going to cut back, and you can see that's already shooting really nicely, but there's quite a nice one over there. This one I'm looking if I can, there's an outward facing one, cutting again at an angle, and I think this one should come off to maintain our basket. And here's an example of it wasn't, it was one I, whoops, oh dear, okay. So here's an example of a crossing stem. You see how this one over here is crossing? What will happen in the wind, these will rub against each other, chafe, become damaged. The moment you have damaged rose flesh literally is when you can get infection into the plant and get, you know, have a problem. So let's cut that away. That's cleaning that up. And really what we're doing is we're cleaning everything up. I'm cutting to an outward facing bud over there. This one, I'm going to cut to, this is quite a, it's all right. So if you're not sure about this one, you could cut over there, but I think I'm going to cut it back because it's really not great. And sometimes you just have to help the rose. Now over here, you've got this funny little stem, so I'm going to cut it like that, just like we did earlier. And now I'm going to cut to an outward facing bud over here. And you'll see it is improving. You are basically in control of where this plant is going for the next season. This one over here is slightly growing in, so I'm going to take that out. This little one over here had really browned off, died back. It happens. And this is quite an old stem. Now what you can do is just cut that one back. You use two hands because that was quite hard. I don't like the way this is growing over here, where you've got this little stem here and then you've got this part with touching over there, so I'm going to take that off and you'll see it's the improvement. I think we can win by taking that one off there, and this is what I mean by controlling what the plant will look like. I'm going to take that inward facing one off. Looking here, this is quite a nice stem, so I'm looking for an outward facing bud. There's one over there, so cutting again at a slight angle, holding the stem up top so it doesn't tear. This little part here has died down, so we'll get rid of that. And there's also a little bit of dieback. If you absolutely cannot find an outward facing one, then go to the next one down. It's not the end of the world. Outward facing bud. This is quite a nice stem. And we're almost there. Again, you've got a bit of a crossover. We don't want that. This is a better stem, this one, than that one. This one is thicker, so we want this. And there is quite a nice outward bud coming. It's a little small right now, but I can see it. It's pinkish. Holding, cutting at an angle, and then I think if we're clever, we can go just to see where this is. There's an outward facing bud over there, so let's take that one at an angle just above the bud, and that's almost there. Now I'm going to take what's called a pair of loppers. You can see that the cutting edge is considerably bigger, about 2 inches. They're much stronger, and the beauty of them is that they let you get into areas where you otherwise couldn't without getting torn up. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to try and get rid of this horrible little bit here, and you'll see it cut beautifully, bounced off. Loppers, you really want a good pair of loppers. You want a good pair of pruners or secateurs. We have quite a lot on the website. Look after them, clean them, sanitize them between usage with something like Lysol spray. Now just notice these two little ones here, very spindly. So I think let's get rid of this one, too tiny. This one I'm going to cut back a little bit. There's a bud down there. Oops, now there's an example. Great. If you can come in, you can see how it's torn. So that's not good. I see another one, little bud here. So I'm going to go there. Sometimes it happens, but we certainly don't want to leave anything that looks like this. That's where disease can come in. So this is this rose almost finished, just over here, little spindly bits, and often these little tiny bits over there. This one could be just taking that off there. And that's pretty much the rose done. There's always a bit you can add to it. That's actually dead. You could hear that click sound. It's a much better rose than it was 20 minutes ago. And you don't have to do it too harshly. You can always add to it. Come back in a week's time. If you see this one hasn't shot out and this happens, then just go down to your next one and make a clean cut. If you see dieback, go down to a clean area, cut again. So I hope that's a help. We'll do another rose next time. Thank you.